Welcome to another episode of Worldbuilding on dMTable. This time around, I got to think, how about doing something original, slightly, by making your own new urban myth, just for the sake of your tabletop campaign, or your game that you might be making, or your novel, who knows. Whichever it may be, it would be great for you to be able to have something custom specifically for your needs without needing to go out of your way, so that you can have a technique on how to create one. And urban myths have been the subject of the flights of fancy and fantasy much longer than most remember, because whilst today backrooms are all the rage, back in the day, very long time ago, Jack the Ripper was one of the original urban, very much modern sense of the word, urban myths. But I'm sure they go even much ways back than that. So, what is a system for somewhat simple approach to creating your own new urban myth for your own purposes? Firstly, we need to think of two things at the same time. Usually I say do this first and do this second, but this time we kind of need to do a tricky thing where we think about the thing from two different angles at the same time. We need something, an idea that feels like full of that spirit, of that soul of engrossing your players, your audience, whoever, into the myth by just flavor. Them saying, oh, this really does make my hair stand on end, or something like that. Especially if it's also mechanically interesting to sort of poke about or explore. And what it should be is full of desire to sort of, even in negative elements, even in horror, it should still have that feeling of drawing you in, making you want to merge with the environment, to enjoy, to explore, to think about. It needn't necessarily even be an environment, but it's something that draws you in to immerse yourself and delve mentally deep into why, how, who, where, when, and how would the world look if this thing were to be true, and or even if this mysterious thing just is, what does that imply about the truth and the rest of the world? It sort of retroactively makes first layer of the setting of the campaign seem different and deeper, but the players are sort of discovering it by themselves by thinking about the implications of this new focused element in the world. Like in the case of Jack the Ripper, what happens in a mundane world if somebody supernaturally capable is going around killing people? Or what if there is no supernaturalness, but there is a conspiracy? Or what if, and so on. And I think a great example are backrooms that I mentioned, because what does additional spatial depth of a different subworld, of a different dimension on top of real world, what does it offer to our setting? What now? What world are we then living in? If we are living in such a world, what does that make out of the world, and what kind of campaign then does that imply? If done well, it's not as simplistic as it may seem at first to some, and then it indeed draws with both mechanics, atmosphere, implications, sometimes even philosophy of the whole thing. But there's the other element I said that we need to think about at the same time, and sort of converge on the idea at the same time from both angles. The other element is something that feels right, like it could happen, or should happen somehow, or just feels like it slots in. It doesn't need to follow the, oh, this is nearest to the physics, realism type of approach. It should follow that idea of this feels like it's somehow a sound idea that no matter how crazy and nonsensical, it just feels like it could, you know? That sort of thing is what you should stumble upon at the same time when you're making something that gives additional layer of depth to your campaign. Not necessarily role, if you want, it can be more action-based, and you find some thing that gives the action additional layer of action. Like with spy games in Cold War, it was not about sort of environmentally a different layer of the world, but mechanically a different layer of action. What those James Bond types do, really. And in some cases, more so realistically, in some cases less so realistically, because it depends whether you wanted to have a more sort of almost retro arcadey feeling to the campaign, or a more some sort of conspiracy theory espionage type of thing with that sort of subject. But whatever the subject is, it has potential if it feels like it would grab imagination for that additional layer, whether in action or in world or in something else, and you wanted to make sense in that simple way that clicks for people. Not in the necessarily a way that makes sense to sense making, but in a way that implies that it makes sense somehow. That sort of thing. And if you succeed to sort of hit it from both angles at the same time, then you'll have idea that works very rightly for such a thing. If not, if you hit one or the other, then you may try to sort of dig around for the other angle until you get it. It might work just as well by sheer research, shall we say, by thinking it up. If you didn't do it at the same time at first, it might still work, but I sort of prefer to hit upon it in that manner where it strikes me and I'm thinking, yeah, that's a great campaign. Then I, as a DM, am more sort of energized to run it and to work on it, which, no matter what kind of creator you are, you probably should do with your work so that it sort of self-lifts itself through you, to give you energy to work. Because if you have an idea that sort of sounds good, but you sort of don't know how it really feels, and you're not that into it, then it's gonna have much difficulties to get anywhere. You have large pauses in planning, large pauses in work, and it just will drag frequently. So it's best to get something that sort of self-hypes you as well, not just the player. And that is the biggest, perhaps the hardest, but the first step to creating your own custom urban myth. And now you, if you have this, you can enjoy elaborating on the mechanics, on how, where, why, etc. And leaving, mind you, the next step is enjoying yourself making all this, but leaving some stuff free for both you having room to maneuver later on, and some things should be left unexplained so that you also can feel as hyped and have as much fun as the players in thinking about it in your free time on how does this work out to the general great ambition of what you wanted for that thing in the first place. Or maybe you don't know what it really builds up to, but you feel that it builds up to something. Well, leave room for yourself and your players to think, speculate, build up. But then you can build all around it, giving those appearances, the conditions for those supernatural appearances, giving those events the additional touches of atmosphere and what sort of NPC appears, what do they say, how do they say it, all sorts of things that should end up looking iconic and feel easy to run around chasing. It needs to be fun to dig about chasing these things. Not just for you, but indeed for the players, because that's what makes fun world building actually usable on somebody else. Which I'll cover in a different episode on what not to do in world building, because one can get lost in world building for themselves only, whilst the idea is to get something dynamic that will get other people's attention as well, despite how much it's mostly for you. Let's not pretend that us DMs and authors don't have an ego to go with what we're doing, but it's good to remember that and control yourself and give fun to others plentifully, knowing that it's much easier for you to give fun to yourself. Therefore, you need to be generous. Well, that brings us to just then, after that, when you feel like you've been original and powerful, especially powerful. You don't have to be too original as long as you have done it on the merit of your own hype and joy for the matter. Then you can research from other such sources what tricks and tidbits you can convert and change so that they are as iconic, but now become somewhat unique for your use. And thus weaving into more and more campaign, getting fleshed out. It is simple, I'll admit, but that is the workflow, and from there on it's just sort of shooting back and forth ideas with yourself, or if you have a friend that won't be spoiled by this, to talk to them, or even perhaps use some other writing aids just so that you can play around with your work and build up on it. Very well. For the basics, that will be all. I can always add to it on a separate occasion. I'm M, and this is dMTable. Player, adventurer, DM, whoever you may be, if you found this worthy of your attention, maybe it was to you useful or unique, perhaps you could spare me a click and I could see you here next or some other week, because every other week I have more such stuff for you. I keep making them by myself. See you next time. Bye.